The children laugh as they blow out the candles on the cake. Kesha hugs Marcus in the kitchen, a typical evening at the Williams house.
911 operator, what happened?
Police officer shot my mother.
8 months before that event, Caleb and Kesha were living in Decatur, Georgia, a suburban area east of Atlanta. The couple rented a modest single-family house in a residential neighborhood. They had been married for 12 years and were raising 2 children, ages 8 and 11. Caleb was employed as an auto mechanic at a small garage, earning an average income. Kesha managed a local daycare center that served working families in the area. Their financial situation was strained. Outstanding credit card balances and the cost of childcare placed continuing pressure on their budget. Disagreements about money had become a regular source of conflict in the marriage. On January 22, 2019, a dispute between the couple escalated to the point where Kesha dialed 911. The call was logged at 9:47 p.m. A patrol car from DeKalb County Police was dispatched. Detective Raymond Cole, a 15-year veteran of the department, was among those who responded. The official incident report described a verbal domestic dispute, no physical injuries, no arrests. The report was brief and closed the same night. From that evening, Cole maintained contact with Kesha. Phone records later obtained in discovery showed that within 2 days, he initiated multiple text exchanges with her. At first, the messages referenced wellness checks and follow-ups, but they gradually shifted into personal conversation. By February, the volume of communication suggested daily contact outside of official duties. Detective Cole had been employed by the department since 2004. Internal files later reviewed by investigators showed at least 6 prior complaints of misconduct, including allegations of harassment of female civilians and inappropriate use of police resources. Each complaint had been dismissed or categorized as unsubstantiated. One neighbor, who had lived next door for 5 years, recalled, "They kept to themselves. The kids played outside. There was never trouble. Just normal family arguments you could overhear sometimes." By contrast, accounts from Cole's colleagues painted a different picture. Several officers described him as unpredictable, especially when drinking. One former partner stated, "When he was off duty and had been drinking, he could become aggressive. Everyone knew to steer clear." In March 2019, Caleb and Kesha's disputes continued. According to family testimony, arguments centered on money, Kesha's late hours at the daycare, and Caleb's suspicion that she was hiding something. Kesha told her sister that Cole had begun showing up near her workplace. She described his behavior as persistent and difficult to confront. There is no record that she filed a complaint at that time. From April through June 2019, the pattern of contact between Cole and Kesha intensified. Text logs recovered later showed exchanges occurring daily, often late at night. Caleb grew increasingly suspicious. On June 17, 2019, a second call was placed from the Williams residence to 911. The log listed domestic disturbance, verbal only. No arrests were made. Cole's name appeared again in the incident report. By July 2019, the Williams marriage was nearing collapse. Caleb reportedly discussed separation with his co-workers. Kesha, meanwhile, was caught between financial strain, marital conflict, and Cole's presence. Witnesses would later testify that she appeared anxious and distracted at work. Her closest friend recalled, "She said she felt cornered. If she told anyone officially about the detective, she was afraid no one would believe her." Kesha confided to her sister, Marlene Taylor, age 37, a licensed practical nurse living in nearby Stone Mountain, that Cole's behavior had become increasingly intrusive. According to Marlene's later statement, she said he would ask where she was going, who she was with, and if Caleb was giving her trouble. She didn't know how to make him stop. She was scared that reporting him would only make things worse. Meanwhile, Caleb Williams became aware of Cole's presence in their lives. Between June and August, Caleb was stopped twice by police patrols for what were officially logged as traffic safety checks. Records indicated no citations were issued, and both stops involved officers from Cole's division. Caleb described to his co-workers that he felt targeted and intimidated, but believed there was no viable way to challenge the situation. As one co-worker later testified, he thought if he complained, they'd just come after him harder. He kept saying, "You can't fight the badge." In one 2016 case, a woman alleged that Cole repeatedly appeared at her workplace after she had contacted police about a domestic dispute. She withdrew her complaint after being advised by a supervisor that it would be her word against an officer. In another case from 2017, a university student alleged that Cole pressured her into unwanted meetings following a traffic stop. The Internal Affairs Unit closed the case citing insufficient evidence. Central to Cole's protection was his immediate supervisor, Sergeant Thomas Reynolds, age 45. Multiple testimonies later alleged that Reynolds regularly minimized or dismissed complaints involving Cole. A retired officer from the same precinct stated, "If paperwork came in on Cole, Reynolds handled it. Things had a way of disappearing." Document reviews supported this claim. Files concerning misconduct complaints were incomplete, missing signatures, or marked as lost in transfer. By September 2019, the strain inside the Williams household was visible. Arguments between Caleb and Kesha increased. He questioned her about messages from Cole, which she described as harassment. He remained unconvinced, interpreting her attempts to de-escalate Cole's behavior as concealment. The tension was compounded by financial problems that continued to mount. Their rent was overdue, and utilities were in arrears. In November 2019, Kesha Williams made the decision to formally document the harassment she had endured from Detective Raymond Cole. After months of private stress and escalating intimidation, she contacted civil rights attorney Angela Morton, age 42, based in Atlanta, who specialized in cases of police misconduct. According to Morton's notes, Kesha described repeated unwanted contact, surveillance of her movements, and fear that her family was in danger if she resisted. Morton advised her to begin compiling records of phone calls, text messages, and instances of direct contact. On November 12th, Kesha filed an official complaint with the DeKalb County Police Department's Internal Affairs Unit. The submission included a summary of text messages from Cole, records of times he appeared at her workplace, and her statement that she felt threatened. The document was logged and assigned a case number. Morton advised her that while retaliation was possible, a formal complaint was the only way to initiate accountability. Within 1 week, Cole became aware of the filing. Investigators later concluded that he had been informed through unofficial channels. On November 18th, Cole appeared at Kesha's workplace, the Bright Steps Child Development Center in Decatur, at approximately 6:30 p.m. According to the director, who later provided a sworn statement, Cole entered the facility in plain clothes and asked to speak with Kesha privately. The conversation lasted less than 10 minutes. Afterward, Kesha was visibly shaken. She told the director that Cole had warned her things would get worse if she continued with the complaint and implied her children might be affected. Around the same time, Caleb Williams discovered text exchanges between Kesha and Cole on her phone. The messages, which included Kesha's attempts to placate Cole with neutral responses, were interpreted by Caleb as evidence of an affair. A relative later testified that Caleb was convinced she was hiding something, and that the discovery intensified arguments between them. Kesha insisted that the messages were her way of keeping Cole calm, but Caleb remained doubtful. In early December 2019, the internal complaint against Cole disappeared from the department's system. Attorney Morton attempted to follow up and was told no active case number existed. When pressed, the Internal Affairs Office claimed the file had been closed due to insufficient evidence. No written explanation was provided. Around the same time, Kesha received anonymous phone calls warning her to stop pursuing action. Caller ID records traced the numbers to disposable phones. The systemic nature of the protections surrounding Cole became increasingly evident. Sergeant Thomas Reynolds, his immediate supervisor, controlled Cole's schedules and attendance reports. Documents later subpoenaed showed that Reynolds had falsified records to indicate Cole was on duty, during times he was in fact off-site and interacting with Kesha. In one example, on the day Cole confronted her at the daycare center, the log listed him as assigned to a burglary follow-up in another district. Additionally, body camera footage that could have corroborated Cole's presence at the Williams residence during prior visits was missing. Department records showed the files were deleted, with entries marked "device malfunction." Testimony from a technician indicated that such malfunctions were rarely coincidental and suggested manual removal. At the command level, Captain James Harris, age 52, blocked any further review of Cole's behavior. According to later investigative reports, Harris was implicated in unrelated financial irregularities involving misuse of departmental funds. Cole and Reynolds were aware of these issues, creating leverage. One officer testified under oath, "Everyone knew Harris was compromised. If Cole went down, he could take Harris with him." By late December, the Williams family considered relocation. Caleb discussed moving with relatives in South Carolina. However, their financial position made relocation unattainable. Caleb's income as a mechanic covered basic expenses, but after legal fees and mounting debts, they had little savings. Kesha's salary from the daycare was modest and primarily allocated toward children's needs. Moving out of state, securing new employment, and arranging housing were beyond their means. The household remained under constant tension. Caleb's distrust of Kesha deepened. He viewed her interactions with Cole as voluntary, unaware of the threats she had received. Kesha, caught between fear of Cole, pressure from her husband, and the absence of institutional support, grew increasingly isolated. She continued to meet with attorney Morton, but without the complaint file, legal options were limited. Morton noted, her case depended on documentation that was deliberately erased. On the evening of September 14, 2019, at approximately 7:40 p.m., Detective Raymond Cole arrived unannounced at the residence of Caleb and Kesha Williams in Decatur, Georgia. The Williams family was having dinner together. According to later statements from the children, ages 8 and 11, Cole knocked on the front door and identified himself as conducting inquiries regarding a reported burglary in the area. No such incident was documented in police dispatch records for that time and location. Caleb Williams confronted Cole at the doorway and questioned the purpose of his visit. The encounter escalated when Caleb insisted that Cole leave the property. Witnesses, specifically the two children, later recounted that voices were raised and physical contact occurred. During the struggle, Kesha attempted to intervene and separate the two men. At that moment, Cole drew his department-issued firearm. He declared that he was acting in self-defense. He discharged 2 rounds, one of which struck Kesha in the chest at close range. She collapsed in front of her children. Immediately following the shooting, Cole retrieved a kitchen knife from the Williams residence and placed it near Kesha's body. Forensic reconstruction later determined that the knife bore no fingerprints consistent with Kesha's. Cole then fired a 3rd round into the wall of the dining room, creating ballistic evidence to suggest a defensive exchange. At 7:46 p.m., Cole transmitted a call over his police radio reporting, "Officer under attack, armed subjects at location." He described the situation as a violent domestic incident in which both Caleb and Kesha had allegedly assaulted him with weapons. Patrol units responded within minutes. When uniformed officers entered the residence, Cole was positioned with his weapon drawn, standing over Kesha's body. Caleb was restrained on the floor by 2 officers. The children were present in the dining area. Body camera records from responding officers were later found incomplete or missing, with segments labeled as corrupted. Cole asserted immediately that he had been attacked. He told arriving personnel that both Caleb and Kesha had attempted to assault him and that he fired in defense of his life. Officers on scene did not isolate the children for independent statements. Instead, according to later affidavits, they were separated from their father and questioned in the presence of Cole. Both children were described as hysterical and non-cooperative. Kesha was transported by ambulance to Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta, where she was pronounced dead at 9:12 p.m. Medical examination confirmed a single gunshot wound to the chest as the cause of death. No evidence of defensive wounds consistent with holding a weapon was documented. Meanwhile, the handling of the crime scene raised questions later examined in court filings. Officers moved items within the dining area before photographs were taken. The knife placed near Kesha's body was bagged without fingerprint processing on site. Ballistic evidence was collected by personnel from Cole's own division. a procedure that violated departmental guidelines requiring independent units in officer-involved shootings. The children were later interviewed but, according to social services notes, had been warned that talking against the officer could make things worse. Both recanted initial statements that identified Cole as the shooter without provocation. In subsequent interviews conducted by child advocacy specialists, the children described the shooting as unprovoked, but those statements were not entered into the official case file. Caleb Williams was arrested at the scene on charges of aggravated assault on a police officer and attempted murder. He was transported to the DeKalb County Jail. At the time of his booking, no injuries consistent with attacking an officer were documented in his medical intake report. Despite this, the arrest affidavit submitted by Cole claimed that Caleb had engaged in a violent physical struggle, attempting to disarm the detective. The following day, September 15th, the preliminary incident report filed by Sergeant Thomas Reynolds reinforced Cole's version of events. It stated that suspects Caleb and Kesha Williams initiated an assault with deadly weapons, and that Cole responded with lawful force in defense of his life. No mention was made of the children's presence during the shooting. Ballistics analysis later conducted by the department's crime lab aligned with Cole's account that 3 rounds were fired. However, an independent review in 2020 identified inconsistencies. The trajectory of the round fired into the wall suggested it had been discharged deliberately at an upward angle, inconsistent with defensive firing. Despite this, the official report categorized all shots as consistent with defensive action. Kesha's body was released to her family for burial, but Caleb was denied attendance at her funeral due to his incarceration. The children were placed temporarily in the custody of Kesha's mother. In March 2020, 6 months after his arrest, Caleb Williams was released from the DeKalb County Jail on bond. The $150,000 bail was secured only after his home was used as collateral. Upon release, he was immediately subject to conditions restricting travel and contact with his children. His legal defense, led by attorney Marcus Grant, filed a civil suit against the DeKalb County Police Department, alleging misconduct in the handling of evidence and the investigation into Detective Raymond Cole. The lawsuit cited missing or altered materials. Surveillance recordings from nearby residences, requested by the defense, were reported by the department as damaged during transfer. Forensic reports on bullet trajectories were inconsistent, with early drafts indicating anomalies later removed from final versions. Witnesses who initially agreed to provide testimony concerning Cole's prior conduct declined to cooperate after reporting unmarked police vehicles parked near their homes. Grant summarized the situation. Every piece of evidence that could support Caleb's innocence has either vanished or been neutralized. By July 2020, custody of the children was transferred to Kesha's mother, Lorraine Taylor, age 58. She filed a petition in family court stating that Caleb's instability and legal troubles made him unfit. The court agreed, citing pending felony charges. Lorraine held Caleb responsible for Kesha's death, telling the judge, if he had protected her, she'd still be alive. Caleb's access to his children was reduced to supervised visits, which he struggled to attend due to financial strain. Internal review of Cole's actions concluded in August 2020. The inquiry, overseen by Sergeant Thomas Reynolds, cleared him of wrongdoing. The report described Cole as having acted within the scope of duty and praised his composure under a dangerous confrontation. Reynolds was subsequently promoted to lieutenant for what the department described as professional handling of a sensitive matter. Cole returned to active duty in September and received a commendation for bravery in the line of duty. Over the following year, Caleb's circumstances deteriorated. His civil case was dismissed in January 2021, with the court citing lack of evidence. Appeals were denied. The district attorney declined to reopen the investigation into Cole. Financial pressure forced Caleb to sell the family home. He moved into a small trailer outside Decatur, relying on sporadic work at auto shops. Colleagues noted that he began drinking heavily. One former employer stated, "He was distracted, unreliable. Not the same man after everything that happened." By summer 2021, Caleb had lost consistent employment. Depression and alcoholism compounded his financial collapse. He described to his attorney that he felt erased from his children's lives. Meanwhile, Cole's career advanced. In September 2021, Cole was named Officer of the Year by the city of Decatur. The award was presented at a public ceremony by the mayor, citing his outstanding service. In a televised interview, Cole referred to the shooting of Kesha Williams as a tragedy that could have been avoided if the family had sought help earlier. For Caleb, this broadcast represented the breaking point. On October 16, 2021, Cole was promoted to lieutenant. That evening, he celebrated with fellow officers at a local bar in downtown Decatur. Caleb located him there after learning of the promotion. According to surveillance footage and eyewitness testimony, Caleb entered the establishment shortly after 11 p.m. He did not attempt to conceal his presence. Witnesses later described him as calm, walking directly to Cole's table. Approaching Cole in front of multiple officers, Caleb invoked his wife's name. Accounts from those present reported that Cole laughed and replied, "Your wife brought it on herself." At that moment, Caleb produced a firearm, later identified as a .38 revolver, and fired 3 shots at close range. Cole was struck twice in the chest and once in the neck, dying at the scene before medical personnel arrived. Caleb placed the revolver on the table and surrendered without resistance. Police officers on site arrested him immediately. In subsequent interviews, he made no attempt to deny his actions. He stated, "I knew I wasn't leaving. I just wanted him to answer for what he did." In June 2022, Caleb Williams was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. During sentencing, the judge acknowledged the circumstances of Kesha's death, but emphasized that vigilante justice cannot be tolerated. Detective Cole was honored posthumously. The department organized a memorial service with full ceremonial recognition. Streets near the precinct were closed for a procession. Speeches described him as a dedicated officer who sacrificed his life in service. His record was presented publicly without reference to prior complaints. The Williams children, now under the guardianship of their grandmother, grew up with the official version of events: a father who murdered a respected police officer,